right, everybody. Welcome back to the Sundays Coming podcast. As always, my name is Caleb, and I'm here with...
Also another Caleb.
Yeah, it's always another Caleb. We need a third Caleb at some point to come on and do like a...
Oh, we can do that.
A three Caleb show, but today we don't have that.
Yep.
We have Sara Emmerson, who we're so excited to talk to.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Sorry, my name is not Caleb.
It's okay. We'll forgive you.
Yeah,
but we still haven't found the right Caleb to have on the show, so we're still working on that.
We'll have to search for that.
Any Calebs out there, just
come on out.
We'll have to vet you.
Send us a DM on Instagram.
Maybe it would work.
There you go.
That's great. But yeah, so Sara, you're here to chat with our podcast community about sort of your story and your ministry history and kind of what you're doing now. And I think even just chatting a little bit before we dove in, I think some of the things that you're able to see from your perspective and context and how you're serving creatives and leaders now will be really challenging and interesting to those listening that are finding themselves in similar situations.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here with you guys and excited to just help the community in whatever way possible. But I'm grateful for this community. You guys are serving so many different people and in so many different areas literally around the world, not just the U.S. So thanks for what you guys do and the inspiration you're bringing.
That's awesome. Yeah. And we're glad to do it. And it's exciting to hear that you're also serving some leaders around the world and around the country too. Yeah. So we'll get into that here in a minute and what you're able to do with your coaching and that aspect of things. But what was sort of just the impetus that got you into this church space, years ago? Like everyone has their story, right? Yeah. Like I used to hit record on the cassette deck in the back of the, the sanctuary, but what was that sort of initial entryway for you?
Well, my dad was a worship pastor, and so we grew up going to church and loving church. Church was a safe place for me and was home really for our family. And so I remember going with him early on Sunday mornings, and I still don't know why they let us do this, but they did, and I am so glad. I would sit there and answer the phones on Sunday morning. So people would call in about what time the services were. And I was like, I don't even know how young. I mean, I was young. And I would answer and tell them like the service times. Hi, this is not Avenue Christian Church. And service is at, 8:30, 9, and 11 or something. So so my brother and I would do that. I remember going. And so we would just be around and at church. And so it became that place that we just loved. Mm-hmm. And as I grew up there, really starting to explore my gifts and what I loved. I loved music and worship and was given opportunities to explore those gifts there in multiple different ways. And so as I continued to grow, that's really where my heart was in the creative arts area. And so I think that's where it all started.
Yeah, answering the phones.
Yeah, answering the phones.
So amazing.
But yeah,
so crazy.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, and doing the overhead projectors, right?
That's a good one.
Does anyone remember, we'd have to send those through the transparencies through the
Was it the
printer?
The flip kind?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And you'd have the big box that you'd have to flip through. Hopefully they'd been alphabetized, but normally you'd still have to look through it.
How much more stressful would that have been than ProPresenter? That's just, all I got to do is hit space bar.
People think they have it hard now. It's
right. They have no idea.
No idea.
No idea. A dial phone. My kids have no clue what the
I love asking kids, like my kids, and I go, if somebody says, hey, pretend like you're holding a phone, like I go like this.
Yeah.
If I ask my kids to do it, they go like this.
Oh, interesting.
iPhone.
Yeah.
They don't know. They don't know what that
I would do that too.
Yeah,
I'm like, hey, kids, pretend you're, calling someone, and they're like, hello, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
That's funny.
This is so
I'll have
weird.
to ask my kids to do that. Yeah,
that's really
that's
funny.
funny.
Oh my gosh,
I love
that's
it.
wild.
Yeah.
And you worked at a church that I also worked at and didn't overlap with you, unfortunately.
True. Very true.
But I feel like when I was thinking back,
I worked at churches that both of you worked at.
Yeah. Also not overlapping.
Yeah, not overlapping. We all
covered a lot of
tag
seasons
teamed,
though.
Right?
Yeah.
I feel like, it would have been 2015, maybe even 2014. I interviewed at Christ Community and I didn't go there right away. And I think what year did you actually leave?
I went to Soul City in 15.
Okay. So I think when I was interviewing, you were still there.
Okay.
So I think it was Erica Watkins was around. Is that right?
She was there. She left right before I came, and then there was, who was after Erica?
There was a lot of
there's
people.
a couple different people there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I just remember, I think that was the first time
Tammy was after Erica.
Yes.
There we go.
I'd never met her. I just heard stories.
I was just there. Well, I was just there for a few Tammy was always really kind to me. I just was there for probably 2 months with her. And then I transitioned to Soul City downtown.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Yeah. It's just like such a small world. Cause I met you for the first time there. I hadn't put together probably until 2019 that your dad Stan was Stan Endicott, and all of the connections that he and I had, and
over the
all
years,
of these things. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I remember when I ran into him.
I'm
at
just
Philo.
making that connection right this moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Wow, that is crazy.
That's
Right?
my dad.
Literally the other day, I don't know why I was on Facebook, and I think I was looking for an old video or old picture, something to show my kids, and I found this video that I have on my Facebook from like 2008 or something like that. That was me in a choir at the National Worship Leaders Conference in Kansas City, and Stan was directing
Are you
the choir.
serious?
Oh yeah,
I need you to send me that.
Oh yes,
he
it
would
is
love
crazy.
that.
Yes, because I like that was the first time I ever had met this quirky, hilarious guy that was like an amazing musician and all this stuff, and he's directing.
That's so great.
Also, I just want to see you singing in a choir.
Oh,
right,
man.
I want to see that
So
too.
good.
Oh,
And
you
I
got to
think it
send
was-
me that.
I think that one was the Gettys and the Ode Project. I don't remember what the band
That's
name was, but it's just
crazy.
like
Oh,
think of
so
2008
fun.
worship,
Yeah.
and that was it. And Stan's just
I
up there
love
on
it.
stage, and I remember when I saw him at Philo years later.
Yeah.
When I first started talking to him, and I was like, "Hey, like I know you, but you definitely don't know me," and told him that story.
that's so fun.
It's a very, very, very
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
small
tell
world.
him to come out to Philo. Every year when we're at Philo,
Oh, yeah.
and everyone's hanging. We FaceTime him and call him, and I'm like,
Yes.
"Hey, Dad, everyone's here," and he's like, "I need to come next year," so I need to tell him to come
Push
out.
on him.
Start playing
Yeah,
now.
and
Totally
you
should.
can You can play the video, put it on a big screen.
Yeah.
We
My
can see
gosh.
Caleb in a choir. Love it.
So
Very
funny.
fun.
So that came up on my phone, and I was
Yeah.
just like, "Oh my gosh, this is like the weirdest thing ever."
That's so
And
great.
So bizarre. But
Yeah.
you've been around, and when you were at Christ Community in your role, what did it start off as, and then where did you end up?
You were there a long time, right?
You were there a long time, and they might have been the same thing. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So over the years, I was at a couple different churches. Those of you that are listening, some of these churches you'll recognize, some you won't. Park Crest Christian Church in Long Beach, California. Crossroads Church in Corona, California. I was there with Judd Wilhite back in the day. Those of you that know Judd now, he's in Vegas. But Judd, I worked with Judd when he wore khaki pleated pants, and him and Lori were out there, and I would go and hang out on their couch. I would take naps on their couch on Sunday afternoons because we'd have Sunday night service too.
Sure.
So you'd have to stay around for that. So I was there at Crossroads. Was at Willow Creek for a few years as the new community producer for the midweek services. I say that I didn't realize it then, but I had the best church job in the world because, guys, I worked Monday through Thursday.
That's it.
That's it.
That's amazing.
I worked Monday through Thursday because we had services Wednesday night and Thursday night.
Yeah.
So I just did 2 really long days. And then I had Friday, Saturday, Sunday off.
Oh my gosh.
But I was single, had just moved out to Chicago and knew no one. So it felt like torture because
Sure.
all weekend I didn't know anyone. So then I would just go and like sing it and be in the worship for the main service, for access.
Sure.
I would just be everywhere because I didn't know anyone. But
That's
it was
so funny.
nowadays everyone's like, you had what? You got to do what?
And the weekends off too.
Right. Working at
I
a
was-
church with the weekends off. Come
Amazing.
on.
I would literally-
Christmas off,
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Easter off.
Right.
That's
I
crazy.
mean, it was
That's
pretty.
pretty good.
It was pretty crazy. But yeah, so I did that, and then in 2003, I started at Christ Community, and I was a service producer. I started out as one of the producers for their DeKalb campus.
Oh, okay.
So I started out there helping them to
I
launch.
didn't know they had that campus that long ago.
Yeah, I started out part-time. My time frames might be
No, it's
off a little
great.
bit, but I started off part-time with them and helping to produce different services and different things like that. And then the DeKalb campus came, and I went there and was there pretty much full-time, producing there and helping to build the worship team and production team and stuff like that. Wild, funny stories about vocal auditions there. Guys, we had this one guy that I'm not kidding. He came, this is still dramatic. He came to audition, and I kid you not, there was a song and a rap thing together, But during the
Classic.
rap part, he started taking his shoes off and throwing them. And then he started taking his shirt off. And that's when we had to cut it off. We had to stop
During
the
an audition?
During the worship audition, we had to stop that one. Yeah. So, I mean, it was
But was
scary
it
when he was
good?
throwing his
Was he good at
shoes.
rapping?
No,
Oh, okay.
no. I mean, he was better at taking his shoes off. But anyway, that was a little traumatic. But lots of funny. I'm sure each of you out there can relate to your own funny stories. But no, had an incredible time helping to build that campus, and then came over to the main campus in St. Charles and was there in total, I was at Christ Community 11 years. So overseeing production and helping with worship and all the things.
Yeah, that's a very long time. Jim is, I think, just now retiring.
Yeah,
it's
that's
an
what I
official
heard.
thing that's been said.
Yeah,
now,
I
which
think
is wild.
next year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I think sometime
I
before Easter.
I stay in touch with him and Sue here, or Sue Moore, but in little bits here and there. So here's some things, but that's such an incredible legacy in ministry there. Yeah.
Yeah, we had Nikki on the podcast
Yeah.
at some point this past season.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about you and that, she grew up under you and everything that she learned was so much of what you were doing there, which is just so cool to see.
Yeah.
Like these now generational people that have stayed there, and she's been there 15 years now. It's crazy.
So Nikki started. She showed up to a rehearsal with her guitar and she was sitting in the back of the church. And I was like, I don't know that she's going to make the worship team, but we'll see, maybe. And then I just went up and started talking to her and just invited her in, like to hang with me and to see what could be. And she just started showing up and helping. And through that, we grew a friendship and she started taking on more responsibility and she interned and now she's running the show. Like I just talked to her the other day and I was on her podcast not too long ago.
Okay.
So to see what God's done through that and through her has been really exciting. And in fact, when I transitioned off and told them I was leaving to go to Soul City, they were like, what are we going to do? I go, you're going to hire Nikki.
Yeah.
If
of course.
she knows everything, you're going to hire Nikki and you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And they did, and they have been.
And they've been great.
It's been great.
Yeah.
And just what a testament, so many people are in a similar situation where they're a leader in some ministry and they have a volunteer that's sort of on the periphery and just needs to be invited in to see what's going on and to see where they fit. And like that's a vision for the people around you where you aren't holding your stuff so close to the vest.
Yeah, I think we
inviting others.
often hold it for a couple
Yeah.
of reasons. One, I think people think they're valued more if they hold on to it. Like if I let that person do it, then they won't value me as much anymore, or I won't be the expert. I think that's one reason. Fear of, then they'll give them my job.
Yeah.
We find our value in what we do too often, so we don't want to give it away. There's multiple different ways. We think, and I hear this from tech, and I coach many production people and people that own production companies and different things like that. Often we think, it's just going to take too long to train them. It's going to take too long to train them. And I get it. If you're a professional and you're bringing in a volunteer that's never ran that before, it is going to take some time to train them. But I'll tell you, the younger they are, the quicker they learn. And it's crazy how quick people are picking up things. And even at Soul City, Lazarus Rios, he's just incredible. I love Laz, but when he started, when he interviewed with me to take over the tech director position there, he was head of an events company and he had been the lead singer in a hard rock screaming band. And that was what he had for a resume.
Yep.
And so the boys are like, on the team were like, we want Laz. And everyone in leadership is like, Sarah, that's the craziest idea you've ever had. And I was like, I know, I'm crazy. Let's go. And so I was like, he's got all the makings of it. So you guys, he taught himself how to do that stuff by watching YouTube. And it was crazy. And he's had a lot of mentors along the way, but now he's mentoring people and running the show and even on tour with Patrick Mayberry helping stuff. So it's crazy how quickly people can learn. And so for those of you that might be listening and you're like, oh, I've got this person that shows some interest, or I don't want to take a ton of time. What I say is invite them into what you're already doing. Like, you don't have to stay after and miss dinner with your family or come in for tons of hours. Find where you're already going to be programming the lights. You know what? Those people will take off work to come and sit with you and program the lights. They care about it that often and that or that much, and they want to get better in their skills. So if you're somebody that's like, with Nikki and other volunteers, I could name off a ton of different people that have now become professionals in their career because I just invited them in. Yeah. So for wherever you are, a ton of you might be getting ready to do year-end services. I don't know when this is going to be airing, but at the end of the year or even whether it's Christmas or Easter, you have rehearsals, you have planning meetings. Just invite them into what you're already doing and then see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I love saying like somebody took a chance on me when I was 20. So like,
and how'd that turn out? Pretty good, right?
Yeah, it turned out fine.
Debatable.
Yeah. But I think, if somebody wouldn't have said, hey, let's take a chance on this kid who hopefully can figure it out along the way, like there's no way that I would ever have gotten the opportunities that I got. I think of when I had that conversation with Stan and going, hey, here's some things that I've been thinking about. And he invited me into a group of people that I was not qualified to be with in any way, shape, or form. People continue to take chances on young people who don't know that. And
it's even like a long-term mindset of what you think your ministry is going to grow into. Like if you have a vision of saying, hey, a year from now, we'd like to be able to take on a little bit more or do this thing or add this thing. It's like if you're not adding that depth and that skill set and like more people to the team, like you're not going to be able to do more and try new creative things and expand, the ministry. And so it's like the exponential growth of those small investments and those small invitations is just so much greater over 5 years than it is like that extra afternoon that you spent investing in that volunteer. Like you really kind of think about it beyond just the day of and more of like, where are we going and how is this helping us like scale?
Well, and a lot of those people have more expendable time.
Yes.
And so you look at that and you go, okay, hey, look, I'm going to give this person a title. I can't give them a salary, but you are now the AI guru of our ministry team. I want you to go and research everything you can about AI to figure out how you could help us in our ministry through this new tool. Like making up different things, but like you are now, give me a title of something, Caleb. What title?
A technical systems engineer.
There you go. It doesn't have to be like that title alone, calling them into something in creating a vision bigger than what they can see gives them the desire to go and spend 10 hours a week researching that. And then they bring you back everything they just learned. And you're able as the leader to pick and choose what would be best. And then you present that to the leadership team and they're like, wow.
Yes.
How did you do that? And you're like, through Joey. Joey helped me learn this. So taking a chance, somebody took a chance on me. When I got hired at Willow Creek as the producer, I was 22 years old, had never produced anything in my life. And they're like, oh, and you should produce videos for Main Stage 2. Do you know how to do that? And I was like, no, but I can try to learn. Yeah. And I remember sitting there, it was God of Wonders. Anyone remember that song? Oh had to produce a video for God of Wonders. So take a chance. If it doesn't work out, guess what? You can make another choice. Yeah. I think that's the fear. Well, what if they're not good? Okay.
Yes.
Make a new choice.
Yeah.
Help them find out what they are good at.
Well, I think it's like, especially in church, when you have that little minion next to you who's growing up with you, whatever that is, it's easier to get those positions hired or approved of a role that didn't exist before because you have a person that's next to you. You're not going, hey, HR, I want to hire a blank role that doesn't exist yet at the church.
And you haven't seen value in it yet.
You haven't seen value. You haven't seen who the person would even be. But now when I go, hey, Jimmy next to me is going to be my right-hand man, and this is what they're already doing. Yeah. Can we pay them part-time? And then all of a sudden it's full-time, and then they're taking my job when I leave 10 years later.
Exactly.
So it's a very, very good thing to do. And I used to tell people that all the time. I'm like, if you want another position in a role, go find the person, have them do it, and then they will see the value in it. Otherwise, it's very, very hard.
It's very difficult to get it approved.
Yes,
otherwise,
it's very hard to get it approved. Yeah.
They need to see the tangible of how it can be valued and who could be there. I like that. Yeah. Not just the how, but the who.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, as you get older, like if somebody hired me today in a church, the questions that I ask and like my, I would say hardness or toughness around the things that I don't want to change about myself are significantly greater than they were 12, 13 years ago. I was very moldable, and I could I was learning in the context of what the culture of the church that I was at. But for me now, stepping into something else, I just go, this is the way that I do it. And you can, take it or leave it, regardless of if it's good or bad. And so I think it's, that ability to have somebody join your culture who's young and hungry and wants to sit and learn. And the time thing is very, very real too. Like, I have 3 kids at home. I want to go home for dinner. If you want to stay and hang out and play with lights all night, be my guest, man. Whatever you want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it can be a win-win for both. And it's a win on a relational level too. I think so sometimes, especially in technical world, one, a lot of people are like lone wolves because they choose to be. But we all know that we were created to be in community. And so if you can find some other lone wolves that want to all hang out and create a little lone wolf pack, you can really enjoy that community and the collaboration of creativity and of doing life together. It's not just about going in, programming it, and going home.
Yeah.
That gets draining. It's where bitterness and frustration and burnout, that's the being alone. A lot of my clients in going through transition or going through different stages in their career or their lives, they're experiencing that bitterness and burnout. A lot of times it's because they're lonely. And so for those of you that are listening, if you're feeling lonely, invite people in. It's not just their responsibility to invite you. I think sometimes we go, well, so-and-so didn't invite me, or so, well, maybe you need to take the onus and invite them. So duplicating those roles or creating those roles is another way to do that and not just get work done, but to actually fulfill that community aspect of your life too.
That the loneliness that can cause some of that bitterness. Like, I don't know if I've ever actually thought of it like that. And I like that a lot because I think of seasons for when I went to Christ Community, we didn't know anybody. And we had left this community of people that we loved and friends and staff members that were like, they were truly a part of our family. We'd have them over all the time. We'd go to their houses. Our kids grew up together, all these things. And then going somewhere else. And this is also during COVID, which didn't help anything either. But finding community is really, really hard because we realize people they just don't inherently come to you. Like, you have to be the one, very similar to the way that I'd tell my kids at school, like, hey, which friends are you making this year when, the beginning of school or whatever. And they're like, oh, I haven't met anybody yet. I'm like, you have to go meet them because those kids aren't going to come to you.
It's interesting that you say finding community, because I think even as you say that, I'm like, I don't know that we find it too often. I think it, especially the older we get, the more it has to be intentional and intentionally created. And so creating community has to happen. And I think sometimes we can get frustrated by that. Like, gosh, I wish it just was easier. We're not in 4th grade anymore. So you don't get you don't get to just invite the whole class to your birthday party and everyone has to be your friend, right? And there's blessings to that. So half the time you were like, I didn't want the whole class to come anyway. I didn't like those people. But creating community is so important, and really identifying, like I heard, I don't know if you guys know who Steve Harvey is, the comedian or whatever. He's on the Family Feud, right? So there was an interview done with him not too long ago, and I was surprised and not surprised at the same time, but they were talking to him about friendships and relationships. And he said, I got about 3 or 4 people in my life that I could call at 2 a.m. if an emergency happened. And it just occurred to me, I was like, doesn't matter your fame, doesn't matter how much money you've got. Like, you have 3 or 4 people in your life that you can call at that 2 a.m. spot. Like, we all need that group, and it doesn't have to be a lot. So one of the things I really love doing with clients and different people is helping them to identify, like, okay, who's your A team? Who's your B team? Who's your C team? Who's your D team? The D team usually is like, okay, we got to get rid of those ones. Like, those are people that aren't, and not really literally get rid of them, but like, I don't need to spend a lot of time on them. So recognizing, like, how do you create community? How do you recreate friendships? How do you do that in the midst of different careers or getting older? It's not an easy thing to do. You don't just find it.
No. That's really good.
You kind of were just alluding to it, how you're transitioning kind of at this part of your story from church staff into the next thing that you were doing. Yeah. So kind of what that evolved into. So maybe talk a little bit about that transition. What was it like to move out of ministry in the church context and sort of forge a path into what you're doing now?
Well, whether it was at Willow or at Christ Community, or after I left Christ Community, I went to a Soul City church and I oversaw the production, communications, marketing, and creative for 7 years there. And no matter what church or environment it was in, I loved the individuals. So people would say, how's your team doing? I'm like, ask me how Fabi is doing, how Lindsay's doing, how Patrick's doing, how Laz is doing, how Jeremy's doing. Those individuals are what fueled me. And so individually coaching has always been something that I've done. I grew up watching it. My dad, some of you on this podcast might know that he is the founder and owner of Slingshot Group. And so coaching has been something that's always been modeled to me. And as I grew up, and something that I just naturally was inclined to do with people. So whether I had a varied experience in my career. So in corporate, in church, in nonprofit. So the individual is what always fueled me. And so as I was really recognizing that out of COVID, our family needed just a break. Like my son plays hockey, my daughter plays basketball. I was having to be gone on the weekends a lot from these different things that they were doing. And the church was going through transition too, in all honesty. And so as I looked at the transition that they were going through and the transition that my family was going through, I was like, okay, what skills do I have now that would be beneficial, that I would love to continue to use to pour out and to serve other people, but in not a selfish way, but in a healthy recognition of that would serve me and my family in this season too. And so in that, I created Sara Emmerson Coaching, and I will never look back. I love it. I love pouring into people individually, into teams, into corporations, helping people see what they couldn't see before, to dream into careers or into new projects that they didn't think were possible. And then helping make the impossible possible by creating strategy and accountability. I love sitting in the messy middle of life and business and of church. Many of you listening are possibly in that messy middle. I know what that's like. I've heard every story, probably not every story, because yours that you're sitting here listening to is unique. It is. But I've heard a lot of them, and it can be hard. And so I like helping, I love and feel called to help people and make sure they don't feel alone in those transitions, and helping them recognize it is a transition. They will get through it, and helping see them through it.
It's interesting as you are doing that both in the ministry space and in the business side, because I think, I mean, for me, and only thinking about a ministry context, I go, it's really hard. It was a hard transition out of ministry. You think it's easy, but I think any season of transitioning out of something that you were doing, or are moving into that's new or fresh or scary is hard for that's just a universal thing for any human on the planet.
Your identity changes in many ways. It's okay, I've been this, and now I'm dreaming about being something else. Even though the skill is there, you have to rebuild that confidence and that identity. Something I talk about often that I had to learn personally is confidence isn't a feeling, it's a skill. So many of you that might be feeling like, oh, that imposter syndrome, or that you're not super confident in something, it's actually not just a feeling, it's a skill. Confidence is competence. There are things that each of you are really competent at, and because you're competent at it, you're confident at it. So anytime we go through a transition and we're like, oh, I just feel so scared or so unsure, it's because you're not competent at it yet. So the confidence will come. You just have to keep doing it. You need more reps. So I know coming from one career to another, that was something I dealt with too. I had to get more reps and learn how to build things and learn how to be a business owner and how to direct other people in doing that. And I had to be willing to jump off the building in a sense and hope the parachute was going to open. And God was that parachute, and it did. And now I'm like, oh wait, I could have. Wow, I actually can fly with this, and I didn't know if I could. So I'm glad I took the risk.
Yeah,
the thing about that you mentioned is like confidence is in part competence, and the thing about competence is it's like something you have control over. Like you can, it's not this thing that just happens to you. You can take steps intentionally if you feel like I need to gain confidence. What are the things I'm doing to increase my competence at whatever I'm stepping into?
Exactly. So for you, what do you feel? What's something that you feel really competent at, Caleb? And not in a bragging way. I mean, we
No.
all have things that we're really good at. What is it that you feel like, yeah, I'm pretty competent at this?
We'll pick a basic one. How about written communication?
Written communication. Do you know that's something that a lot of people listening here, and even myself, I'm not great at written communication. That's awesome. And how did you get competent at it?
A long time doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
ChatGPT.
Not chat. No. I still honestly can't even figure out how to use ChatGPT in an effective way. So I'm still doing it very old school.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty creepy, crazy how close it can get to some stuff. You do have to give it some, I'm just scratching the surface on figuring it out. But
it's interesting.
even working with it with so many of the corporations that I'm working with, gosh, it can write emails a lot quicker than we can. So that's, you just have to give it the right stuff. So,
But I always think by the time I give it all the prompts it needs to write this email, I could have just written this email myself.
Okay, but you could. Let me tell you that, and that goes back to the competence. You could because you're a great written communication person. There's a whole slew of people that it would take an hour or two that they can do it in 10 minutes now. So I think that another thing that we don't realize, and I see this in a lot of production people that I work with, the things that come super easy to you, that you get frustrated at other people for, are usually gifts of yours. That's where God has extra gifted you. So I don't know this for sure, but my guess is when you see somebody who sends you something and the written communication is subpar, do you have thoughts about that? Sometimes?
I mean, I have, I control those thoughts.
Okay, you control them.
I offer grace to those.
You do, and that's
different
great.
Skills,
you do.
Yes,
that's very graceful.
It's something that you definitely observe. You know,
But
it's like those things stand out to you.
They
right?
do.
You see, and you identify them, and it. You know.
Yeah, and some of you that are listening, you go to a live event and the audio isn't what you would, the mix isn't what you would want it to be, and it's driving you crazy. And it's not because you're a bad person or you're being judgy. It's that, oh wait, I'm actually really gifted at this, and it's hard for me to turn that off.
And I'm totally being judgy also.
Yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
we can totally be judgy, but there's other times that you're like, wait, this is you use that as a trigger to recognize, oh wait, I'm gifted at this, and so how can I in a humble way use that gift? You do not walk up to the sound engineer and offer to fix it for him. I am not saying
Just
that.
walk up and say, "Way to go, man."
No, yeah, exactly. You
Way
do
to go.
because they're trying their best too. But I just want you to know that there's going to be times that you're really gifted at something and you start to get irritated when you see it. Instead of getting irritated, think to yourself, "Oh wait, I'm frustrated right now, or this is a trigger to me right now because I'm actually gifted in that. And so how can I go back and use this trigger moment to elevate the fact that, or to recognize the fact that this is something that I'm gifted in, and I need to figure out how to use that in a positive manner, not in a negative manner or a judgy manner." But I think we discount that. Like sometimes we're like, oh, it comes so natural to us that we don't see it.
Yeah. I think it's hard for people, like even as you asked that question to Caleb, I go, what am I good at? And it's hard for me to go, what are those things? And I think of myself then in different contexts. What am I good at here at this table today? What am I good at 2 years ago at Christ Community? What am I good at the chapel 2 years before that? And I think that's the case for so many different ministry leaders, because we get thrown in these positions that are supposed to be the Swiss Army knife of, I need to know how to write amazing emails and communicate and lead my volunteers and develop them and have great skills at whatever my task is that I do every week. And I think so many people don't end up using those gifts the way that they could or should, specifically in a ministry context, but I'm sure that is the case outside of ministry as well, even as you're walking people through some of that stuff.
Yeah, I find that people, because of the pace of church and because of the creative process and how we do it and the desire for excellence and how we put in, there's one thing of desiring excellence, and then there's a whole nother spiritual aspect when you're like, the excellence needs to be for the one and only God. And you're like, oh my gosh, now the excellence needs to be the best excellence ever. We struggle with living reactively instead of responsibly. And so that's a concept that that I come back to for myself and with clients often is, are we living reactively or responsibly? And reactively is literally just having to emotionally respond to whatever is coming at us at every moment of the day. And it's, so-and-so wants this project done, and now my list has to go by the wayside. Or so a lot of what I enjoy doing is helping people figure out, how do I live and work more responsibly, even if everyone else around me is reactive. And responsibly is having that time and energy to take full ownership of the outcome. Like if you can take full ownership of the outcome and create the space and the time and the energy needed to not just make a decision because it's being thrown at you, but to make a decision because it's really the best decision that needs to be made. And sometimes you can take 5 minutes for that. It doesn't have to be, I need 24 hours before I can respond. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it's just like, hey, give me a second. I need to think through this instead of just hopping up and responding. But we're used to having live events, which you have to react, and that's a whole nother deal. But
I like you saying learning how to do that on your own, even if other people around you aren't. Because I think it's like, I think of myself and I go, man, I blamed the system for my reactivity to everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is just the way that my church is. They're late on everything. We have to make decisions like this. And that was my excuse, or everybody else around me is doing the same thing. So that makes it feel normal. And I would be the one slowing people down or whatever that is to not be reactive.
I remember I was working once and somebody asked me, one of the executive pastors asked me why I didn't use a calendar. And I was like, well, because I don't know when the bosses are going to call me in and put something else on my plate. So if I keep everything open, then I'm just available. And I laugh at that now because it's literally so opposite from what I'm doing now. Now I live by my calendar. But it's just funny to think that, I was in a system where it was very reactive. And looking back at that now, I go, oh, now I have the skills that would have.
Yeah. How do you think, so like, I'm just imagining people that are listening to this, and even myself, thinking myself in 5 years ago. And if I was listening to this podcast and hearing you say that, I go, how do I even do that? Because everybody around me is doing all of those same things. It's not that I don't want to be more responsible and less reactive, but it's like this thing that is now so ingrained in who I am that I don't even know how to break out of it, because I'm breaking out of this bubble. It feels really, really hard to get out of.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to recognize there's 3 levels of control in every situation for every single person. There's full control, partial control, and no control. And the reactive people are usually doing things and having things come at us that we have no control over. And then there's things that we have partial control over, right? So an audio engineer has partial control over the mix on the weekend at a church, correct?
Yeah.
He might be standing there doing the buttons, but there's somebody telling him what the max is and what.
And there's somebody else
source.
giving him the source to go to that console. Yeah.
So there's a partial control there. You have full control over your calendar. You have full control over your attitude. You have full control over the questions that you ask. You have full control over your boundaries that you set. You have full control over crucial conversations. I'd say the first step is gaining full control over the things that you really have control over, and the things that you don't, which is oddly the things that our mind spends the most time thinking about.
Totally.
We have to learn to let those go. And that's a lot of what the mind work that I do with my clients is, okay, how do we do that? How do we learn to you have 70,000 thoughts a day. Did you know that?
No.
70,000. And you guys are great at managing a task list, managing inputs, managing all of the things that come at you. But I'm curious, how many of you listening today know how to manage your thoughts? Do you know how?
I don't know how.
Yeah.
At all.
It's exciting.
My brain is, I don't know, what 70,000 is normal. Mine feels higher than that.
Yeah, yours might be 90.
Yes.
But recognizing, and I can give you a scratch the surface a little bit, we have to recognize if you're thinking about them like all of these thoughts, like airplanes that are flying over and you're the air traffic control person. You need to decide, you can't control which ones are coming into the airs, what's that called? The
airspace.
Thank you. The airspace. You can't control what is coming into the airspace, but you can control which ones you let go into a holding pattern and which ones you let land and which ones you send away.
That's so good.
It's recognizing, okay, hey, this thought came into my head. There's a tool that I created called the gut check. And what that is this thought good? Is this thought useful? And is this thought true? So a thought comes into your head and you're like, can't get rid of it. You take a pause and you ask yourself, okay, is this thought good? Is this thought useful? Is it true? If it's not, you have choices. You can either release it. There's some thoughts that you're like, yeah, we talked about having judgy thoughts, right? Some of those we can tell from our morals or our character, I shouldn't think that about that person. Yes, his mix is bad, but I'm not going to say anything. It's okay. He's learning. You release the thought. Some of them are that easy. Some of them won't stop coming around. And you have to learn to replace it. So you have to choose something that's more proactive and positive. And every time that thought comes in your mind, you literally are reprogramming your mind. And you have to replace that thought. And then sometimes you have to repurpose it. There might be some times that you're looking at a thought and you're like, is it good? Is it useful? Is it true? You're like, well, I don't know if it's true. Okay, well, then you've got some work to do to figure it out. You need to go investigate if it's true. So you put it on a Post-it, and then you go and do the work to investigate it, and then you come back. That's responsible living versus reactive.
Yeah. And I think what the foundation of that whole practice is recognizing the reality that you are not your thoughts. I think a lot of times people just think like the thoughts that are in my head are just me existing. But like for what you're describing, or even we were talking earlier about like using thoughts as triggers to like illuminate certain things or spark certain actions, like to be able to recognize that a thought is a trigger to do something, you have to be able to think about your thoughts from like a level 2 position versus just like, I'm just experiencing life and I have no control how it's coming at me. And like, that's just where I'm at. But being able to say, there's a me that's beyond my thoughts and I can actually take control of my thoughts. And like you're saying, determine how I want them to impact me and how I'm going to respond to them. And I think that's just something, if you haven't thought about that before, to start like processing a little bit and start to kind of shift your mindset out.
Yeah,
well
said.
And I think not, it's very, very easy to let those thoughts linger for way longer than what they should. And most of the time, it's the things that like aren't true. It's the fake conversations that you have in your head with your boss that you're mad at or whatever that you think that they're going to say to you. And those things rarely ever happen, right? The 1% of time, something comes even remotely true to that, those conversations.
Yeah, the times that you're like, they hate me. They don't want me to have dinner with my family. They never want me to see my children on the weekends. They don't want me to ever go to the basketball or the soccer game. No, I highly doubt that that's true.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy for that to snowball down the hill and go. And now all of a sudden you have these real thoughts in somebody, when you're having a conversation with your boss later and you're like, I was fighting with you in the shower this morning. Is the way that, in my head is the way that I'm thinking about it. And that can seep out of you, I think, if you don't let those thoughts be released. So I love that metaphor of the airplane and airspace.
Well, you mentioned like recognizing thoughts that aren't true. I think the other thing is like recognizing thoughts that are true.
Yeah.
But that you don't actually really like the fact they're true. And then
you can replace it.
Well, or it's like, hey, instead of recognizing this thought is true, maybe it's like, hey, you didn't actually do that. You didn't do your best at this thing and the outcome wasn't great. Well, that's true. And you can feel really bad about that. Or you can say, hey, here are the lessons that I'm going to observe from that. And here are the steps I'm going to take to grow my competence, as we were talking about earlier, and use that as sort of a roadmap to what you're going to invest in. So it's a true thought. But are you just sort of feeling bad about it and leaving it at that? Or are you saying, I'm going to take that fact and I'm going to now learn some things from it and take some action to make the next experience different or to change that truth to be untrue? Like I want the thing that, I wasn't competent about that. That was true. Now I am competent about that. That's a new truth that I can, in some part, kind of create within my reality if I'm able to, put some focused thought towards it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I loved what you said earlier about you're gaining control. This is a sweeping judgment, I know, but I think most of you that are listening to this, if you're technically minded, control is something that we like, right? Doesn't mean that you have to be in control all the time, but we like to be in control of things. And that's not just technical people, that's humans.
Everything.
Right. But recognizing that you can be in control of this part of your life, and it doesn't have to just be happening to you. Like we feel like life's happening to us a lot.
Yeah.
And so to regain control of this. And I love how you're talking about like even when it doesn't go well, like if it's true that you didn't do your best, or it's true that the team failed in some way. Man, have I got stories about that. I've had many of those over the years where my best wasn't good enough. And so I think that's something I love to help people with, and actually helping people recognize that your best isn't just an effort. There's sometimes that people are like, well, I'm trying my best. Right. Okay, well, what do you do if your best isn't good enough?
Yeah.
And so those are things that I like to help people with, and to look at that too, because your best is your effort is only one part of your best. There's multiple parts of your best.
And I think this is a helpful reframing, because it views it less as like a personal indictment. Like your best isn't good enough. And that's like, so I think it's easy to internalize that as like, well, I'm bad. Versus saying your best isn't good enough yet, because
Correct.
you're on a journey of growth,
self-discovery,
and like think about, like, use exercise as a metaphor. Like your best isn't good enough yet. You're not able to run that distance or lift that weight or whatever, and that's like, we're going to be honest about that. But we're going to take steps if we want to hit this goal to move in that direction. And so, acknowledging that your best isn't good enough is not to like make a moral judgment on yourself, but it's to say, hey, I desire to go here, so here are the things that I'm going to do to take those steps, and here's the mentors I'm going to bring around me, or whatever that looks like.
Well, and I think if all of us took a second to think back to where we are in our career right now, and then think of like year one of wherever you are starting, like think of the skills that you have now versus that year. Or maybe you are in year one right now and you're like, oh, I'm just getting started. But your best will get better and can get better if you want it to.
Yeah.
I will say some people have a fixed mindset and they're not interested in growing. And I think if you find yourself in that space, I would encourage you to really seek out some mentorship or some coaching or some, I think coaching can help anything, but that's just, I'm biased.
Are you a coach? Or?
But yeah, well, you know, but I think if we get into the place where we're not willing to explore that, if we're not willing to think that our best can get better, it's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
There's always somebody that can do something better than we can.
Totally.
There's always somebody that can do it better than we can. Can somebody do it in the same way with the same attitude and graciousness and love that I can bring? Like that's where you need to go, oh, wait, I do have a skill that maybe my skill can get better, but how is my commitment to this team? How is my attitude? How is my grace and care for other people? Yeah. So your best is not just skill. Your best is built up of a lot of other things too.
Yeah, and I think too, to remember that if your best isn't good enough, and by that I mean you recognize that you have room for improvement, which should be all of us, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't also mean that you're not in the right role. Like, because I think it could be easy if you're admitting to yourself like, hey, I have room for improvement. What can go along with that is, well, I shouldn't be in the job that I have, or I shouldn't have the responsibility that I have. Like, I'm not good enough for that. And I don't think those two things are necessarily tied together. It's like you could be in the perfect role, because the thing that's going to help that role and that team and that community succeed is the fact that you are looking intentionally to grow and stretch and bring people along with you and like invite input and create a culture of that humility, right?
You don't need to, I mean, if you're the leader on the team, the best thing you can do is find people that are better than you and bring them along with you. So if you're not the expert all the time, that's actually a good thing.
And tell the team that. Like, hey, here's something that I don't know and I'm trying to figure out.
Well, and hey, I just found this video from this person. Like, if you have a budget to bring somebody in and train people, great. If you don't, gosh, there's so many videos out there that you can watch and that are trainings, and you can gather your team together and show them a training. You don't have to be the expert in order to make an impact.
Yeah.
And I think so often, specifically in ministry, we're hired by the organization because they look at you as having all of these skills put together because, we interview as we do know all of those things exactly the way that we, should for walking into this role. And then when we don't, and we're like, oh shoot, there's this, the identity piece comes out really, really hard because you go, oh my gosh, they just hired me to be this guy to help create a better culture on this team or whatever. And I can't do it fast enough, or I can't do it as good as maybe I thought that I was going to be able to do it when I was interviewing and telling them, hey, executive pastor, like I can do this. And here's my experience that got me to that point. And yeah, it affects your identity very greatly. And you just go, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I should, or feel like you were just a total fraud in, faking it till you make it. And you're like, oh crap, now they're going to find out.
Yeah. And what you find most often is if you come to them and say, here's what I don't know yet. Here's what I don't know yet. I don't know how to do this piece of it yet. I know how to do this. And here's what you're asking. The other thing that I find too is in what you're saying, Caleb, is you want to be honest about your ability. Because if they have an expectation that's beyond what you have agreed to or beyond what maybe was painted to them, and you get into the situation, you're like, this is above my head. You want to right size that. Yeah. That's going to help you and it's going to help them. Sometimes too, we go in though thinking that they have an expectation about something and they never did.
100%.
And so we're putting all this pressure on ourselves and we're like, they are expecting this and this and this. And that was all in our head. So really clarifying that. I know communication is not just a struggle for certain groups of people. It's a struggle for all of us. We all can get better with communication. I want you to remember those those conversations that feel like conflict are nothing more than a crucial conversation. You're not going to battle with the person. You're right-sizing it. Yeah. So you're going in and you're clarifying. So I would say, okay, if you're going to have a crucial conversation, there's 3 things that you need to do. You need to be clear, you need to be kind, and you need to be concise. And so being clear is being clear about what your ability is. Hey, look, I know I thought I could do this, and guess what? I can't. Whenever I was overseeing teams, because I'm a big visionary and I believe anything is possible, which is why it makes me great to help other people believe and see that too. But the technical directors would get frustrated sometimes with me because they'd be like, Sarah, it's not all, what you want isn't doable. If they would just come and tell me, we had one, Chris, hey, Chris Sweet, if you're listening to this, but we had one, Chris, and he recognized that if he came to me and told me that it wasn't possible, I would either try to find another way to do it or I wouldn't believe him. He needed to come to me and tell me, okay, how much is it going to cost me? How much time is it going to take? Why isn't it possible? Tell me how I could do it. Even if it was, Sarah, yes, you could do that idea, but we would need NASA to fly us all to the moon. I'd be like, oh, now I have something to deal with. Yes. So instead of getting frustrated at the questions that come at you that make you feel like, I don't know how to do that. This is too much of an expectation. Go and have that conversation. Here's what it would take to do that. I don't have the personal skills to do it myself. We'd have to bring in these contractors, and it would cost us this much time, effort, and resources from a team standpoint too. Bring those facts and then right-size the expectation, because sometimes the expectation is in your head.
Totally. Well, and I think that goes back to being able to reflect on whatever those thoughts are before I respond in that moment, even if it's 5 minutes or it is 24 hours later, to go, I don't know how we actually pull that off. Let me go do some research. Let me figure out what this big Christmas thing you want to do and what it would actually take. And then let me come back tomorrow, because I don't feel like in this moment, all I want to say is, no, that's not possible. But the reality is I actually have no idea what it's going to take. So let me figure that out and then come back to you and go, actually, we do need NASA to fly to the moon.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But it's not reacting in that moment to just be like, nope, it's not possible. Because, and one of the things that I love, Todd Elliott, says all the time, he's like, you can't say that something isn't possible and then make it happen the next week.
Correct, because now they're not going to believe you and they're just going to keep asking.
And there are groups of people that do that more than others. And, I came from one of those groups of people, and we just inherently started with no because, whatever. And then we would magically come up with some amazing way to do it. And leadership is like, I told you. I'm like, shh, like, you didn't say that, right?
Yeah. It's interesting, and it's so good. I love the 24-hour rule, but they use it in sports a lot. My son is a hockey player, and growing up, there was this 24-hour rule. If you were ticked off at the coach, or you thought your kid wasn't getting enough playing time, or there was something that happened, you weren't allowed to, like, it was part of the contract. You were not allowed to speak to the coach about it for 24 hours. And so even when I'm working with corporations or CFOs, CEOs, we talk about the 24-hour rule. Like, it's so good to go, oh, you know what? I just need to, let me think about that. Like, give me 24 hours and I'll get back with you on my thoughts. That way it gives you time to emotionally regulate and to get the facts, because it might be no still, but now you actually have the facts as to why it's no. And they're not just looking at you like you're emotional about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we will always respond out of emotions as humans, the inherent instant motion that or emotion that I have to respond. Oh, my kid isn't getting enough playing time. I'm going to go rip the kid or rip the coach apart because I want that to happen, for me. But yeah, we should do that everywhere, and every church should implement that.
Yeah, there's a 24-hour rule, and even to implement it for yourself personally.
Yeah.
And that's what I talk about, identifying those boundaries. Nobody has to know about your 24-hour rule. You don't have to go around with making a T-shirt that says, I have a 24-hour rule. I don't know. Maybe that would be helpful to you. Maybe you do want to make a T-shirt.
And this is your
24-hour rule. Yeah,
I love that.
You can actually purchase those at no.
Yeah. It applies in smaller contexts too. I think about meetings. I'm sure you guys have observed this in yourself, where something's happening or someone's talking and you have a thought, and what you need is the 24-second rule. Not even 24 hours.
That's a good idea.
I could just blurt out the thought, or I could just wait and let them get a little further into their idea, or me just for 30 seconds, just think a little bit more about what I might say or how I might respond, and then respond, and how much that can kind of improve communication, even in just that very small time window, versus it's identifying your thoughts and not just letting them flow through you unregulated. But thought, it might be a good thought, might be a bad thought. Take 24 seconds and think about it, and then maybe say something or maybe don't. But yeah, all of those things you can do to slow yourself down, even if it's a tiny bit, usually result in better communication.
Yeah, great idea. Great idea. I'm going to use that.
Yeah?
I'll probably steal that from you.
Well,
there you go. 24
you can add it
and
to your
24
shirt.
seconds.
Right?
Oh, there you go. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know, that it's so applicable to just about anybody listening, regardless of if you're in ministry, if you're in business, if you're and regardless of where you sit in the org chart of those things. It's very, very easy for us in our personalities and the what's the right word for it? I don't know, just who we are as people and the way that we communicate. I think everybody needs to be able to do that better.
Yeah, it's applicable in every relationship. So
yeah, man, that's crazy.
I was thinking, you've alluded a little bit to your coaching and different aspects of that and different sort of constituencies that you work with. But you had said earlier that a lot of the coaching you do is with people that are in transitions. They're stepping into something new, or maybe they're considering stepping into something new. I think that might be where a lot of people listening to this find themselves, either about to, or just having stepped into something new, or maybe daydreaming about maybe wanting to step into something new.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, are there themes or patterns or just things that you observe across, people that are in that scenario that you notice come up again and again, and some just helpful things that people might take away that would guide them in a good direction if they're wrestling through a transition like that?
Yeah, I think when we're in times of transition, there's different transitions. There's ones that we choose, and that feels exciting yet scary, and we don't have the strategy yet. Sometimes we don't have the accountability. So there's those transitions. There's transitions that you get thrown into. Sometimes it's a layoff, or it's a diagnosis, or there's grief that happens. That's transitions like that in family dynamics, different things like that. And then there's transitions just in your own personal life, in different seasons of your life. You might be getting older, your career might be changing. You might just want your career to change. You might have an idea that you've always wanted to go after, but not felt like you had the support or the strategy to do that. So I think in each of those scenarios, risk is a big part of it. So I constantly see, no matter if it's an artist or I have clients in many different vocations. So whether they're bankers or artists or in nonprofits or I have a farmer, like in all the different,
awesome.
yeah, it is in production companies, whatever it is. Taking risks is not easy for us.
Yeah.
And so I think helping people understand that the risk in and of itself is the reward. We often as humans only want to take the risk if we know that it's going to turn out well.
Sure.
We're like, oh, I got a pretty good percentage that it's going to turn out well, then I'm willing to take it.
Yeah.
What if where you want to go never happens, but it leads you, but the taking the first step of that risk leads you to something better than where you are now anyway.
Yeah.
And so I think helping people recognize that you're, by understanding your core values, by understanding your foundation, by gaining the control, like we talked about the three levels of control, you can create a safe environment to take a risk step by step. You don't have to jump. You can just take those steps and see what happens and then gauge a new path off of that. And I mean, for me, if you're somebody that's been thrown into a transition, I think, raise your hand if you've ever been thrown into a transition, right? All of us have. Regularity and normalcy and a routine is needed. So if you're feeling like you're in a chaotic season, maybe you were thrown into it in your job, maybe it's personally, you need to get back personally to a firm foundation. So I would just go back to the basics. Like, what are you eating? How much are you sleeping? Are you exercising? Give yourself a schedule. And because when you can regulate that stuff, you're going to be able to regulate your mind a lot better. And you want to make, like we talked about, you want to make those responsible decisions, not just reactive. So often in transitions, we just make a reactive decision because we're trying to survive. It's that survival mode that kicks in.
Yeah, so. I think it's really interesting that you mentioned the risk. I think reflecting even back on the rest of our conversation around, are you going to have that conversation with someone? Are you going to admit that you have areas to grow in and then take steps to improve your competency? Are you going to take a step for a transition that you're thinking about maybe doing? Like, so much of it comes down to, are you able to be okay with doing something that is an unknown, right? Yeah. You're going to do a step, you're going to take a risk, and you have to like emotionally regulate through that. And like, if you can start to build that muscle, then you're able to really, if you build that muscle, you're able to step through so many more opportunities, because every opportunity is going to have some aspect of risk. Yeah. And the more you're comfortable with it, the more opportunities, it's not really that more opportunities present themselves to you than someone that's not able to take a risk. It's just that you're willing to step into them more than someone that maybe is more hesitant to step into them.
It's stepping into the risk, being okay if I fail. I'm in Enneagram 6, so I don't do any of those things.
Yeah, failure is not an option.
No, it is not an option. And if it's going to be, I'm going to know about it ahead of time, and I'm going to be okay walking into it. But like the number of things that I think about, like I always joke with people. I'm like, during COVID, I was so prepared. I had so much toilet paper. You guys have no idea.
It was your fault.
It's all my fault. Sorry, everybody.
You were the one at Costco. In first in line
every single time, right? And everything that I do, just as a person and my personality, who God made me, is to go. I want to do risk management on risk assessment of every single thing that I do in my life. Yeah, it's a terrible way to live. Like, it really is more than not.
Well, it's mentally crippling.
Correct.
It's that fear is it can be. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. Yeah.
Well, again, it's like taking control of those thoughts, and everyone has them. Like, whatever that thought pattern is that's just instinctual for you, there's going to be good things about it that you can leverage in a positive way. There's going to be things that it isn't good, and so just being able to identify
think of how much toilet paper you guys all have here now because of
right. Just kidding. But like, maybe you would take control of that thought and say like, well, I'm going to buy 2 extra packages, not 20 extra packages. Right. Like,
I think we literally had enough to, like, I think it went a full year.
Holy cow.
After.
Dude. That's you were ready.
I was ready. I was so ready.
You were ready. Well, but think about it though, Caleb. Think about the things that have turned out well for you in life. Were they times that you stepped out into the unknown?
Always. Almost always.
It wasn't because you had so much toilet paper.
Correct.
That didn't help you.
Because what it ends up being for me is I try to control the outcome of every single situation. I try to control as much things as I can so that I can force the outcome to be as close to what I want as humanly possible. But in the times that I've had to step out of that and go, I don't know what's going to happen here, but we're going to try it. Those are the things that that's where God blessed me and my family the most every single time.
Yeah.
To go, hey, I have to leave that control to him to go, hey, the outcome of whatever this meeting is that I'm walking into that I don't know why I got called into with HR and the senior pastor. It's not a great thing, right?
That's always scary.
Right? And so those kind of situations I think everybody deals with, and mine tends to be more present than my wife's is, and and that's also why God places people and family and those people that you can call at 2 a.m. in your life, to help walk you through some of those things when you step out in a risk and it doesn't go the way that you were hoping that it was going to go.
Yeah. I think too, you had asked what to say to people or the things that they need. A good amount of my clients are not believers. And so I get to covertly pastor people, whether they know it or not. But I think something for me that I recognize and that I definitely help people that are believers recognize too is the manna. I think so much of what we worry about, we talked about that worry ahead of time and things like that, really focusing in on, okay, you have what you need to worry about today. And so sometimes in those moments of transition, shortening the thoughts about the future are really helpful.
Yes.
Okay, all I'm going to think about and give myself time to work on is what I'm going to be doing today. So if you're in a season of transition right now, I'd say work on what the manna is for today. What has God given you today to work on, to be grateful for, to have gratitude towards. And the problem that you have today is what you should work on. The one tomorrow, there'll be plenty of time tomorrow to work on that one.
Yeah. I think that speaks so much to what you were saying earlier around when you're thinking about taking a risk, don't think of it as going from 0 to 10. It's just what's step 1, what's step 2, what's step 3. And as you do step 1, it will illuminate what the right step 2 is. Yeah. You don't have to necessarily know even what it's going to be. You're kind of alluding there, at least it brings to mind to me, the scripture that talks about let tomorrow worry about itself. Today has enough trouble of its own. It's that's the exact idea is do the right thing, deal with what you need to deal with today, and let that right decision inform what you're going to do tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And you don't get to see, we don't get to see 10 steps down the road. It's just right now. And how are we going to steward that? And then let the next steps present themselves and try to steward each one well. And hopefully that sort of right sizes that balance of control and risk and being able to kind of live well in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and often we cut ourselves off from those blessings that you were talking about, Caleb, that we get to see because we are unwilling to take the first step because we talk ourselves out of what we think step 12 is.
Yeah.
Well, that would never work like that, so I'm not even going to take step 1.
Right.
What I would say is try taking step 1. You never know. It might be the very best thing you ever did, but if all you're concerned about is the fact that step 12 would never work, step 12 might never present itself.
Well, the thing is too, what you think step 12 is before you even take step 1, it's probably not what the real step 12 is.
Never.
Because the steps along the way help illuminate what actually take you in a direction you can't really predict until you start going down the path.
Right.
And how many could any of us have predicted exactly where we ended up 15 years ago? All the steps that you took brought you to where you are because you went through the right door and you were responsible and steward and invested in your team or did whatever you needed to do in that one step to then take the next and the next. And it's trying to predict it all the way to the end is maybe unhelpful.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Very unhelpful.
My dad always had a saying growing up, and I use it still often, but he always would say, right decisions equal right results. Consequences are a separate issue. And often we're trying to mitigate our lives or our situations by thinking about all the consequences and consequences can be good and bad. The things that are going to happen, we're trying to put those into the decision-making side. Well, I can't make that decision because so-and-so is going to be mad, and I can't make that decision because then this would happen, or I'd have to do this, or it's going to cost more money or more time. No, let's back up. What's the right decision? What's the first step you're going to take? Let's make the right decision. And then how everything falls, you're going to be able to deal with the consequence of that decision after. But you can't mix the two, because then you're not going to end up making the right decision.
It's so good.
A lot to think
Stan
about.
coming through.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
Always. Oh my gosh.
Stan, I guess you can come on the podcast sometime.
Hey.
and
I
talk,
did tell
talk
him.
You
about
should.
When I saw him in
stuff too.
September, I said, we got to get you out here.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh, hey, bonus, because if he comes out to do that,
I
then
know.
he would get to see me
I know.
and the kids
Yes,
and my
there you go.
husband.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
My gosh. Well, if people, would love to connect with you or learn more about what you do in coaching, or feel like that could be helpful for them, where could they find you, reach you, all the things?
SaraEmmerson.com. And Emerson has 2 M's.
Perfect.
And Sarah has no H. So
Easy to remember.
SaraEmmerson.com. I'm on the socials. You can also go to SaraEmmersonCoaching.com. Choose your own adventure.
That's great.
Yeah. And for those of you that are listening, my favorite thing is to sit with people in the messy middle of life or business or ministry. I've been there. I get it. For anyone that's listening, and always, if you need to have a conversation, just go on my website and sign up for a free consultation. I want to talk with you and want to hear more about what's going on and what your best, help you decide what your best next step is. That's my goal at all times, is to help people define what that best next step is. So if you're listening and that sounds like that could be helpful to you, please reach out.
Awesome.
That's so good. Well, thank you again for being here. And we'll see you guys all next time.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. I look
Absolutely.
forward to seeing you again.
Yes.
All right.